Ike from Gemma Mechanics. Welcome to the channel. Today I'm working on a 99 Jeep Grand Cherokee. This is the WJ model. And as you can see here, I have the rear wheel bearing out. So the axle shaft and the wheel bearing are pressed together and they all come out as one assembly out through here. You do not need to get access through the differential. You're going to do these 4 bolts on the back side, and you can work at it just by wiggling it and tapping it with a hammer, or you can get a slide hammer. Slide hammer makes it really easy, and just pop, it just pops right out. Usually leaves the race back still in here, but it's very loose. You should be able to wiggle it out by hand if it leaves the race in there. So the big problem on these WJs is these wheel bearings get loose, and you probably, if you own one, you're working on one, you probably notice that if you're doing something on the back, if you have the back jacked up, you can grab the wheel, and if you pull on the wheel like this, in and out, the bearing will go clunk, 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 just a little bit like that. What happens is if that gets too bad, the axle is able to start moving like this as you're going down the road, and it eggs out the seal, start leaking differential fluid all over your brakes, and it destroys your brakes. So this particular one, actually recently replaced the brakes and noticed that the bearing was going out, and it had been leaking. So I cleaned it up, replaced the brakes. The customer got right back to me with this because he wanted me to do it before we got oil on the brakes, which is good timing. So I've actually have it all out. Have it on the back of my diesel over here. So here it is. I've already pulled the bearing off. So what I got here is, first things first, when you're dealing with the old ones, it's best to just cut them off. And you want to be real careful not to scar the axle shaft. And so like this is your retainer ring for the bearing. And what you do is you cut with a grinder, you cut it so that it's cut really to thin metal there, and then you just hit it with a punch and snap. It'll snap like that. You see that crack there? And then the ring will actually just slide right off. And the same, you could do the same with the bearings, but the bearings are obviously a bit more tricky. You have to cut the race, like the basket, pull and pry the basket away from the inner race, drop all the roller bearings, and then scar. You put that real carefully because you're real tight in here. I like to go on a real sharp angle. That way my grinder doesn't hit any of this stuff over here. And you just grind a real nice cut into the race. Make sure you don't cut through the race. You just cut a deep groove in it with a grinder, hit it with a punch, snap, slides right off. Just like that. No problem. Actually, a pretty close call on that one. But it all turned out pretty good. And then in front of all that is your actual seal that leaks the oil. Sits up here. Now in front of the seal, now this is a big problem with these. In front of the seal, what holds everything, the bearings, the seal, tensions the seal, and holds the axle shaft in the axle, is a plate. I like to call it the tension plate or the retainer plate. And that, where did I set that thing? Oh, it's right here actually. Is this. So this sets up here and actually has the studs in it that bolt it on. I tap the studs out because of the problem that these have. If you're using an old retainer plate, tension plate, this ring in here that actually puts tension on the seal and the bearings and actually holds everything snugly together tends to get bent. So what I've done here, I've knocked the studs out. I had this down on here and I just evenly with a hammer tapped all the way around. Pretty good taps. You want to bend this cone back in flat. So I've already done that. You can see the hit marks all the way around. And if you tilt it like this, you can see that the edge is pretty square. Before it was bent out just a little bit, and that's what made this bearing set and seal go bad. So you can see it's pretty square in there. That's how you want it. You pull these old ones off and they tend to be bent. It's very little, but they'll be bent outward a little bit. And so you put your new bearings, your new seals on with this old plate in front of it. You bolt it all down and it will be tight for maybe a month, it'll be snug, and then all of a sudden, boom, you're leaking oil again. And you get in there, jack it up, and clunk, 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 clunk. The same clunking's going on. What the hell, you know? I went through multiple sets with my Jeep. This is why I know about this problem. Is I went through 3 sets of bearings over about the course of a year. And consistently, 3 months on the dot, the seal would blow out, ruin my brakes. I had to redo the whole thing. And when I got to the 3rd set, I was like, it can't be the bearings. there's gotta be something else. It can't be like cheap bearings or something, because I tried different brands and stuff. And so I pretty much figured out that I was the only thing that was being reused was this tension plate, and it was bent out just a little bit. The cone was bent out a little bit. I did the same thing, pulled the studs out, got this on a nice flat surface, hammered this cone down flat, and sure enough, when you put it back together, it all slides into the axle tube, and this plate fits snug, but there's still like a decent gap between it and the axle. And then those bolts, those studs really draw this plate in and really get a lot of tension on that new bearing set. And that's what holds it all together nice and snug for years and years. I did that about 4 years ago. Haven't had a problem since on my WJ, and I've put about 40,000 miles on it. Could not be happier with the results. Really glad I figured it out. And I thought I would share all this information with you all. So hopefully this helps you out a lot, gets your Jeep back on the road. And if you enjoyed the video, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching.